Welcome back to Two Pretty Good Bad Men, an Alias Smith & Jones podcast. I'm your unknowable host, Tabitha, and today we are covering the penultimate episode of Season 1, Never Trust an Honest Man. I cannot believe we're almost done with the first season. It's kind of sad in a way. It makes us like a third of the way through the show and like half done with Pete's episodes, I think. I don't know. I don't understand math. This episode was shot near the end of March 1971, and it aired on April 15th, 1971, Eastern and Central Time. It aired April 29th, Mountain and Pacific Time. That happened due to a basketball game that ran long. Stupid sports constantly ruining my life. The story was by Roy Huggins, and the teleplay was by Phil DeGeer? I probably said that wrong. The episode was directed by Douglas Hayes. You remember him from way back in the pilot? He co-wrote the pilot with Glenn A. Larson under the alias Matthew Howard. Phil DeGeer had a very accomplished television career. He created the series Simon & Simon. He was a producer on JAG and NCIS, a supervising producer on Black Sheep Squadron, and an executive producer on the 1980s Twilight Zone revival. His first IMDb writing credit was for the series Run for Your Life, which was another Roy Huggins show. His second credit was the Pete Duel TV movie How to Steal an Airplane. So we've so far had the director, co-star, and now the writer of that movie cross over to this show. That movie, which apparently was originally a pilot for something else and obviously didn't get picked up, was about half action scenes, and I saw the lowest quality copy ever of it on YouTube, so sometimes I couldn't really tell what was happening. Still, it's a fun, if kind of pile of nothing little movie. He also created two short-lived series, The Whiz Kids and Air America. Our guest stars this week include Severn Darden, playing two roles, Oscar Harlingen and that character's son, Alan Harlingen. Darden was in a couple of the Planet of the Apes movies, Battle for the Planet of the Apes and Conquest of the Planet of the Apes. He was also in Vanishing Point and They Shoot Horses, Don't They? And television, he was in Alfred Hitchcock Presents, The Monkees, Car 54, Where Are You?, The Night Stalker, Laverne and Shirley, and Beauty and the Beast. The Ron Perlman one. He was also the villain in the Starsky and Hutch episode, Hutchinson for Murder 1. Darden was one of the original cast members of Second City in Chicago. In 1962, he was nominated for a Tony Award for Best Featured Actor in a Musical for the show From the Second City. Next is Marge Doucet as Christine McNeese. Doucet did a lot of work on soap operas. She worked on Guiding Light, All My Children, Days of Our Lives, and Santa Barbara. She appeared on shows like Get Smart, The Facts of Life, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Daniel Boone, Hawaii Five-0, and WKRP in Cincinnati. And best of all, she was in the episode Spock's Brain of Star Trek. You know, the one where these dumb, hot aliens literally take Spock's brain out of his body and McCoy has to operate his body like a robot? Brain and brain! What is brain? That was peak comedy. Then we have Richard Anderson, not to be confused with Richard Dean Anderson. This Anderson was a regular on The $6 Million Man and Kung Fu: The Legend Continues. I did not know that Kung Fu had a sequel series. He was a regular on the short-lived Glenn A. Larson show Cover Up, and much like ASJ, that show too was cut short after the tragic death of the lead. On that show, it was John Eric Hexum. Hexum was fooling around with a prop gun on set and fired a blank into his temple. His skull was shattered and he passed away. Just don't play with guns. Even if you think they can't hurt you, blanks can still hurt you. Just leave them alone. Anderson did another short-lived series called Dan August with Norman Fell and Burt Reynolds, and those are two names I never thought would go together. He guest starred on The Fugitive, The Green Hornet, The Untouchables, The Rifleman, and Hardcastle and McCormick. He also played Murdoch psychiatrist Dr. Richter on the A-Team. That character only appeared once, but he was mentioned frequently. In Murdoch's words, he was the most important person in his life outside of the rest of the team. And finally, we have Robert Donner as Preacher. He was also in The Vanishing Point. He was in the Eastwood movie, High Plains Drifter, and the Newman movie, Cool Hand Luke. And he did a John Wayne movie called Chisholm. You know who was also in that movie? Jeffrey Dole. Donner had a recurring role on Mork and Mindy and The Waltons. He guest starred on shows like Laredo, I Spy, The Mod Squad, Ben Murphy's short-lived show Griff, Charlie's Angels, and later shows like Early Edition and Dharma and Greg. The Maverick connection in this episode is the luggage mix-up. That happened in the Maverick episode The 39th Star. Other than the bag switch, the two episodes really have nothing in common. Okay, time to get into it. The sneak peek this time is two guys sitting on top of some rocks waiting to bushwhack Hayes and Kid. Luckily, one of the guys recognizes them as his old friends, and he can't do it. Now, I'm really sorry if you can hear my dogs banging around in the background. After the credits, the boys are riding a train back from Mexico. Kid is sleeping, but Hayes is bored, so he keeps waking him up to bug him. It's cute. The kid is annoyed and wants to go back to sleep. He says he knows that Hayes is nervous because things have been going so well, and that always makes him uneasy. Dude, I'm the same way. They're approached by a man named Quirt, who invites them to a poker game in the next car at the request of Mr. Harlingen, who owns the railroad. It's actually not so much an invitation as it is an order. They join the game. And now they're doing something slightly different again with the credits. They're showing the guest actors before freeze-framing their face and putting their names across it. Show, be consistent, I am begging you. They also show some meaningful close-up of Hayes' bag. That will be important. Once again, this game goes all night long. And Harlingen just likes the game because they're playing for 100 chips a penny. Hayes ends up owing 27 cents. I'm more okay with this because I'm not losing hundreds of dollars. Harlingen tells his assistant Christine to go and get some rest. She's been sitting in the car with him all this time, and it looks like she was embroidering or something like that. When she leaves the car, Harlingen tells the boys that she actually hates his guts. Her father used to be his business partner, but was a really bad gambling addict, and ended up losing everything and then getting ousted from the business. Nothing worse than a gambler, except of course a train robber, says Harlingen. The boys just smile. Question, is there anyone else on this train? It's oddly empty. Or could they just not afford extras this week? Anyway, the boys get off at a town called Bountiful. Now it's Hayes' turn to try and get some sleep. He's dozing on the bed, the one bed, again, just saying, while the kid is shaving. He's got his shirt off, by the way. Thank you, Ben Murphy. You look fantastic. A+, no notes. He asks Hayes if he can use his razor. Hayes says sure, and the kid goes through Hayes' bag. You know, the same bag that they were having those close-ups of earlier. He begins pulling out women's clothing. Hayes is like, what the fuck? And realizes that he must have accidentally grabbed the wrong one. They find a Bible that says it belongs to Christine, but the holy text has been hollowed out so we can secretly hold a handful of jewels. Kid's first thought is, yay, we're rich! But Hayes is like, no, we have to return them. And Kid's like, but mine. What he actually says is, nope, it's like my mom used to say, finders keepers, losers weepers. Hayes reminds him that his mother was a crook, and since the kid doesn't deny this, I guess it's canon. Also, has that phrase really been around since the 1800s? Hayes convinces the kid that keeping the jewels would only make their situation worse, even though, yes, he'd like to keep them too. Meanwhile, Harlingen, Quirt, and Christine arrive at Harlingen's mansion, where we meet his son, Alan. Remember, he's played by the same actor, just not in old age makeup this time. Alan is super in love with Christine, but Christine hates his father, and therefore hates him. She says he looks just like his father. It's just gonna be a hard pass from her. They open up the bag, which is actually Hayes' bag, and freak out to discover that the jewels are gone. Harlingen tells Quirt to find Smith and Jones because they're the only ones who could have switched bags. Remember, there was apparently nobody else on that train. The boys start riding off towards the mansion. They spot Quirt and a couple more men on the way and duck out of sight. When they do get to the place, Hayes deduces which room must be Christine's. He has some wild logic that makes sense and impresses the kid for about 5 seconds until the kid sees her in a window in a different room. Hayes defends himself that at least he got the right floor. They climb up to Christine's window, looking like absolute creeps, and she understandably freaks out when she spots them. Quirt gets back to the house and tells Harlingen that they followed the boys' trail right back here. Even their horses are tied up outside. Really? You left your horses outside, boys? And you call that being sneaky? Upstairs, the boys manage to revive Christine, who has passed out, and hand over the jewels. She's surprised that they actually brought them back, and she says they're not even hers, they're Harlingen's. She leads them downstairs to the dumbstruck man. Hayes' hair looks a tad shorter in this episode, and it's working for him. I'm about to save a horse and ride a cowboy, you know what I mean? Harlingen offers the boys cigars and $100 apiece. And they're like, seriously? They just returned millions of dollars in stones to them, and he's offering them $200 total as a reward? And in check form. Hayes casually says that they'll just mention it to the marshal, and Harlingen doesn't want that happening at all. Hayes wants $1,000 apiece for their silence. Harlingen assures them that whatever's going on with the stones is all legal, it's just confidential. But Hayes is really good at negotiating in this scene. It turns out the stones were collateral for a $5 million loan that Harlingen gave. Later on, Alan and his dad are talking about the stones, and as the discussion goes on, Harlingen discovers that the stones are just glass. Understandably, he thinks Hayes and the kid must have switched them. I really don't blame him for that. What is he supposed to think? He orders Court to go after them and bring them back alive. Alan assures Christine that it's not her fault, and he tries to kiss her and then whine when she rebuffs him again. Dude, she already said no. Rejection hurts, I understand, but back off. Court rounds up some men and sets out after our heroes. He hires a man named Logan to kill Hayes and the kid. Logan goes to an alcoholic man simply named Preacher and recruits him to help. The boys are camping out and enjoying their dinner when Court and his men surround them. He says he's going to escort them back by gunpoint to Mr. Harlingen's. And now we're back at the sneak peek. Logan and Preacher were the ones waiting to bushwhack the boys as they rode through the canyon. But when Preacher gets a good look at them, he realizes that they're his old buddies, Hannibal Hayes and Kid Curry, and bless his heart, he is not about to kill his friends. Preacher used to ride with them, and he says that the two of them saved his life more times than he can count. Logan, however, doesn't know them, so he's fine with killing them. Preacher cracks him on the head with a rifle, and Logan's shot goes wild. And then he takes Logan's money. With that plan out the window, Court moves on to plan B. He takes the boys off by a waterfall, and he plays dumb like he doesn't know why Harlingen is mad at them and wants to bring them back. And he doesn't like working for him anymore. He says he's going to follow his conscience, and he's going to let them escape. He'll simply fire over their heads as they ride away up into the rocks. However, our boys aren't stupid, and they figure this is a setup. So when they get on their horses, they rush Court as fast as they can. They ride past him while he follows, still shooting, and the boys are almost cornered by him when Preacher shows up and shoots him. Court is dead. Preacher's like, whoops, didn't mean to do that. Oh wells. He tells him that Court is the one who hired him to kill them in the first place. I like how Kid puts his arm around Preacher. He must have been a good friend to them, and vice versa. They thank him for saving them, and he takes off. Once they're alone again, Kid tells Hayes that they should just cut and run. But Hayes, A, wants to know what Harlingen wants with them, and B, knows that if they take off, they're going to be on the hook for killing Court. They sneak back into the Harlingen house in the middle of the night, and I really hope they hid their horses this time. They get into his bedroom and wake him up to have a little chat. Kid has his gun pulled just so it all goes nice and smooth. They ask him why he had his men go after them. He tells them about the fake jewels and that they should know they're the ones who'd switched them. They tell him that if they had the real gems, they would not be coming back to talk to him now. They say Court must have made the switch since he tried to kill them. Sadly, they can't prove that because, Court's kind of dead. They do say that Preacher can back up their claim, though. Hayes says if Harlingen backs off, they'll find the real stones. He agrees to give them a chance. The next day, Christine rides off in her buggy, and the boys follow her discreetly. She pulls to a stop outside of an old house. Fun fact, this house is in fact the Bates house from Psycho. They don't have a full shot of the whole thing, but you can tell. She's the one who has the real jewels hidden in her kitchen. The boys come in and bust her, and when Hayes moves towards her, she pulls a gun, and a split second later, Kid pulls his. And I like this shot because it's not a cutaway. Normally, when the Kid does his fast draw, they simply cut to his opponent real quick, and by the time they cut back, the gun is already in his hand. Like, he doesn't actually have to quick draw. Such an obvious editing trick that it's almost funny. Like that scene in Blazing Saddles when Gene Wilder shoots the guns out of 10 guys' hands, and then it just cuts back to him sitting on his horse with his arm crossed. Yeah, it's like that. But this is all done in one shot, so we actually see Kid pull his gun, which means Ben Murphy probably did have to practice to get pretty fast at it. Anyway, Christine's loser father appears in the doorway and would love to know just what the hell's going on here. The boys tell them that Christine stole $5 million from her boss, Harlingen. She's like, it's fine because that money rightfully belongs to her father. After all, Harlingen cheated him out of his share in the business and ruined his life. Then dear old Dad has to admit that actually none of that is true. He just told her that so she wouldn't know that he was such a fuck-up. Everything Harlingen said about him is in fact true. He tells her he never realized that his lying would have such an effect on her. Uh-huh. Really now, you just never considered that your lies would have consequences. Christine's upset, but considering everything, not that upset. She still goes and hugs her dad. Christine, people are dead because of you. Quirt is dead. Granted, he tried to kill Hayes and Kid, but still. Alan argues with his father about Christine. Harlingen wants to fire her and bring charges against her. That is reasonable. Alan is like, no, Daddy, I love her. You can't blame her for believing in her father. Hey, question again. Why did he hire her in the first place? Why would you hire someone you know despises you? Why would you hire the kid of your ex-business partner who financially screwed himself out of being very wealthy? Why would you do it? Make it make sense. Alan says he'll never speak to his father again if he fires her. Or brings charges to her. Dude, really? I know you're into her, but she seriously tried to screw your dad over. In the tag, there's a party at the Harlingen home. Alan and Christine are now engaged. What? Why? Harlingen has given his blessing and says it's understandable what she did. I mean, again, at least one person is dead. And the boys were almost dead. Whatever. The boys are dressed in their nice clothes for this. It's so cute when they do that. They approach Harlingen looking for a reward after all they did to get his jewels back. Too bad for them, he doesn't intend to give them anything. He found out from Preacher that Smith and Jones are really Hayes and Curry. This happens to them so many times. Damn it, Preacher! He goes on to say that you don't get to be a millionaire by being generous. That is true. All millionaires, or in today, at least all billionaires, are inherently evil people. You can't possibly have that much wealth and still be a good person. You just can't. Then he calls them by their opposite names, and Hayes pulls the old, I'm Hayes, he's Curry. And here was me thinking that was just a Starsky and Hutch thing. The boys leave, all dressed up, and totally broke. Poor things. The end. The original outline of this script was written during the time when the schedule was a problem, so it was planned as a Hayes-only story. But it was much, much darker. It had Hayes kill Quirt, and then later strangle a deputy to escape being arrested. Huggins was like, no to all of that. That is not who Hayes is. He's not violent, and he's certainly not a killer. Which, yeah, I have to agree with that. That's just absolutely out of character for him. Luckily, the schedule got back on track, and they were able to add Kid back into the story. The episode, as it turned out, is fine. It's a step down from the last two, but it has some nice moments. I liked meeting Preacher. It's good to see them have a real friend who is actually loyal to them and not just looking to get something out of them. The banter between the boys is fun, and I love the scene between them in the hotel room. Hayes picking out the wrong bedroom for Christine is fun, too. I even like Harlingen. He's a fun character. He's kind of like Big Mac, but not as smart. The line of the episode goes to the kid. When Hayes is freaking out that the bag isn't his, Kid just keeps teasing him until Hayes pulls out the Bible. When he sees that, then he says, well, now I'm convinced it's not your bag. And the episode goes to Hayes. I love his bargaining skills in the early scenes with Harlingen. Plus the hair. Have I mentioned the hair? It's very on point this week. Next time on Alias, Smith and Joan, it's the season finale and the return of Harry Briscoe. Research for this podcast comes mainly from the wonderful book Alias, Smith and Jones, the story of two pretty good bad men, by Sandra K. Sagala and Joanne M. Bagwell. Thanks for listening.